Madam President, you and I are colleagues from the same state, so you know as well as I know about the problems that we have with the opioid addiction, prescription drug abuse throughout our state, but all over this country. So we've come to a crisis point in this country. In 2014, 18,893 people died to a prescription opiate overdose. This is legal prescription drugs that are made by outstanding pharmaceutical manufacturers. They're approved by the Food and Drug Administration. They're prescribed to us by the most trusted person outside of our family, our doctors. And it's created an epidemic of unbelievable proportions. 51 people every day are dying from legal prescription drug abuse. Worse yet, the trend is going in the wrong way. It's not reducing, it's increasing. 16% more people died in 2014 than they died in 2013, and we've lost almost 200,000 since 1999. And if we don't take action soon, this epidemic will become of mammoth proportion that we have done very little, if anything, to control. Unfortunately, a major barrier from suffering opiate addiction is insufficient access to substance abuse treatment. Myself, like many people in public service 20, 30 years ago, when this epidemic hit, we basically treated it as a crime. And it is a crime if it's a violent crime is committed because of drugs or sexual crime. But most likely that's not the case. It's mostly larceny from stealing. An addict, to support their habit, usually steals from their family, their extended family, their friends. And once everyone's up to their problem that they have, this addiction, then they start stealing anywhere they can, which usually results in an arrest, incarceration, and found guilty of larceny, and then they get a felony on their record. But knowing how difficult this is, without treating it as an illness, we've had, between 2009 and 13, only 22% of Americans, only 22% suffering from opiate addiction could find treatment centers. Now, if this was any other epidemic, which is a health crisis, we have ways of treating that. You'll find a hospital, you'll find someone that's basically going to give you treatment for the illness that you have, not with opiates. In 2014, 42,000 of our fellow West Virginians, Madam President, 42,000, and 4,000 of these were children, sought treatment for illegal abuse, but failed to find any treatment. Think about this. If you were a parent and has a child that's addicted, and that child wants to get help, and you want to get that child help, and there's no place to put that child. And compare that to what we do as far as our incarceration. My cousin is Michael Alloy, is a judge, is a federal magistrate judge. Michael was telling me that we were talking. He says, Joe, you know, I've never, ever been turned down for someone that I've had to put in jail or in prison. For someone telling me, I'm sorry, Judge, you can't put them in jail because we don't have a jail cell. We've always been able to find a jail cell for somebody that we want to incarcerate. But then he told me, he says, guess what, Joe? He says, probably 8 out of 10 times a person that is recommended treatment by the court. Recommended treatment, I've got no beds to put them in, no place to send them for treatment. I can find a jail cell for them and a jail bed. I can't find a treatment bed. That's what we're dealing with in America. So we've got to change. In West Virginia, our longest term facility, West Virginia, more than 100 beds, and that's Recovery Point in Huntington, West Virginia. They do an unbelievable job. In 2014, about 15,000 West Virginians received some form of drug or alcohol abuse treatment, but nearly 60,000 of West Virginians were identified as in need of substance abuse treatment and couldn't find it. Based on conversations with our law enforcement, and you can check in any of your towns, wherever you may live in this great country of ours, and you'll find out probably 7 to 8 out of 10 people that are picked up for any crime or charged with a crime is drug-related. So it's having a tremendous effect on our economy and the lives of people. So what I have done is I've come up with a piece of legislation which has got bipartisan support, and we're hoping to get much more. But it's lifeboat. And what it really says is if we need this treatment, how do we fund it? In these tough times that we have, it's hard to find the finances, and we have to have pay-fors. So I looked at it in a very practical way, and I said, you know, we have a fee or a tax, if you will, on cigarettes. We have a fee or a tax on alcohol. And these are all things that are detrimental to society and to the human being themselves. And I looked at basically a 1 penny per milligram fee on opiates. And this is for every opiate that's produced in America or sold in America, 1 penny per milligram. That is unbelievably spinning off about $1.5 to $2 billion if we would enforce this. That gives us a funding stream to where these judges can put a person that needs treatment. We can have adequate treatment centers with a continual funding stream. I would hope that we wouldn't get a penny, not $1 from these fees, because that means that we're not out pushing opiates, but that's not the case. That is not the case. So this lifeboat, and it's exactly what it says it is, it gives people a lifeboat. It gives them a chance to clean themselves up.
The senator from West Virginia yield for a question.
Absolutely.
Through the chair. First, I want to thank him for his leadership on this issue, and I know it's personal to you and the presiding officer. In my state, I think the death rate from opioid and heroin is somewhere around 12 per 100,000. In your state, I understand 25. In the state of New Hampshire, 35. So you have twice the problem that we have, just in strict statistical work terms, and New Hampshire, for some reason, 3 times. And you have been outspoken on this issue, and I'm glad you have, because it is not just local to you, it's a national problem. The one thing that came up yesterday when we had the acting administrator for the Drug Enforcement Agency come before the Judiciary Committee, and most people are not aware, I know you and the presiding officer are aware, of the fact that each year the Drug Enforcement Agency approves the production of opioids by pharma. In other words, the pharmaceutical companies cannot produce these pills that are classified as narcotic, pain reliever pills, without the approval of the Drug Enforcement Agency. And I'm sure the senator from West Virginia is aware of the fact that when they've set the annual productions quotas for opioids by United States pharmaceutical companies, there has been a dramatic increase. Between 1993 and 2015, 22-year period of time, oxycodone production jumped 40 times, from 3.5 tons to over 150 tons of oxycodone approved by the Drug Enforcement Agency, dramatically. And during the same period, the production of hydrocodone went up 12 times, hydromorphone 23 times, and fentanyl, the drug that killed Prince, 25 times. I asked Mr. Goldenberg, who is the acting administrator, we're trying to destroy the opioid beast, and you are feeding it. The production levels, do you take into consideration what's happening with these drugs once they're produced by pharma, and what happens to them next? Under the ordinary course of events, they are prescribed by doctors and dentists, or in some cases, some other medical professionals, and they make it to the street. And he said he was aware of it, and he understood that his agency was bearing some responsibility for what has happened. Well, that's an understatement. They're certainly bearing some responsibility. So I asked the senator from West Virginia, who's been outspoken and a real leader on this issue, when we look at the Food and Drug Administration's role on the types of opioids, and we look at the Drug Enforcement Agency's role when it comes to the volume of production, is it clear that our government has some responsibility for where we are today with this opioid epidemic?
Absolutely, Senator. I've been working, trying to change the culture of the FDA, and I have been working with the DEA, because not only the DEA basically sets the allotment, they also are the ones that give the license to the doctors and make sure that that doctor is certified that they can dispense it. And if you have a doctor that's abusing it, if you have a doctor that basically is putting 10 or 20 times more on the market in a certain section or region of our state or our country more than the other doctors, maybe that person's irresponsible. Maybe they should be questioned and taken off the list of prescribing. So absolutely, and this is what, it's a cultural change. This thing all came about in the 80s when basically pain, Your element of pain was one of the 5th criteria of wellness. And it was the Veterans Administration. The Veterans Administration that brought the product on. So the genie got out of the bottle. How do we put it back? We can if we continue to fight it, but it's just a horrible scourge on us.
If Senator would yield through the chair further for a question, you and I will both concede that there are people with chronic acute pain that need relief every single day. And we're not quarreling with that it should be prescribed. And there is a definite need, and pain is an issue in the lives of many people. And we need to deal with it responsibly, medically responsible ways. I guess the question that comes to mind is when I ask my local doctors in Illinois about this, some have shown extraordinary leadership. The Chicago Medical Society, for example, I commend them. I've written to all the medical associations saying, what are you doing in training your doctors to know when you're prescribing too much or too many pills? And the Chicago Medical Association, I want to give special credit to, they've stepped up and said, we are, with our members, we're educating them. But here's the thing that I hear repeatedly, and I'd like your response to it. 3% of the doctors are responsible for 50% of the prescriptions. That's probably true. I can't quarrel with it, or would I? But then someone said, but that's not the whole story. Many times a person going to one of the 97% of physicians ends up starting down the path toward opioid addiction. And then that first physician says, no more. Then they turn to the 3% who are just doling out the prescriptions right and left. So it seems to me that if the 3% are the worst offenders and the ones that are really feeding the system in volume, we still can't look beyond the 97% and their responsibility to make sure that their prescriptions do not start a person down the path toward opioid addiction. I'd ask the senator from West Virginia, have you encountered this 3% or the responsibility of physicians?
Well, yes. And when this became the problem that we know it is today, my brother's a doctor. He went through med school in the 70s. They weren't schooled on this. They weren't trained on this. Most doctors will tell you they got very little training on what substance abuse and what it could do. What they find out about it is a salesman from the pharmaceutical selling it to their office and giving them free samples and say, this is a miracle drug. Try it. I think that people will like it. Yes, you have people, we call them pill mills. They're running pill mills. It's basically a business plan for them. The other thing is the doctors that don't have that knowledge and they haven't been trained in it, and we just finally have gotten the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, to put basically prescription guidelines. You don't need, just because a Schedule II narcotic, which is basically oxycodone, Vicodin, Loratab, some of the most renowned ones that we know of, they have a 30-day. So a doctor can prescribe you 30 days. I have young people in my office to go get a tooth extraction. They get a 30-day prescription. They might need a 2-day prescription or a 3-day. So this is what we're cracking down on, the 97% that should not just be giving you 30 days because that's what they're allowed to, should be using good common sense. Says, listen, you're a young, strong person. You'll maybe do this for 2 or 3 days. If it's worse, come back and see me or call.
If the senator would yield further through the chair for a question. In the year 2014, the Drug Enforcement Agency of the United States approved the production of 14 billion opioid tablets in the United States. 2014, 14 billion. Enough opioid pills for every adult in America to have a 1-month prescription. So I asked a doctor in DuPage County in Illinois, I said to him, why? Why would doctors prescribe, as you said, Senator, 30-day prescription for a patient who may only need 2 or 3 days and could be renewed if they need more? And he said some of them are not trained well enough, and some of them don't want to get a phone call on a weekend. Now, that was a pretty grim analysis by another doctor, but it really calls into question, first, pharma producing 14 billion opioid pills for America, and doctors handing to patients a 30-day prescription when in good conscience, a few days would have been more than enough. The question is, how do we at the federal level, and I ask you because you are a moderate to conservative Democrat, and I know you're not looking for the big hand of government to solve all our problems. How do we deal with pharma overproduction? How do we deal with doctors over prescription?
Well, basically, I truly believe it's been a business plan. That's being very cynical, if you will. We have a lawsuit going on in the southern part of West Virginia right now in Boone County. There's been a judge down there, Judge Thompson, has been more active than anybody I've ever seen. And he has a case before him now, and basically I think it's 4 or 5 distributors. So you have the pharmaceutical manufacturers that go to the distributors basically spread it out to basically the pharmacies. They sent in a very small period of time over 200 million pills into a little part of our state. Now, you're telling me that they didn't think that they were oversupplying an area? Shouldn't somebody raise a flag there? Shouldn't a moral conscience say, there's no way they can consume this much? There's no way that any people in a small rural area can consume this much narcotics. Something's wrong. Now, you're telling me that wasn't a business plan, so I am going to testify. They asked me. I said, I most happily would love to be on a stand, and I want them to question me what it's done to our state. I'm happy to be accountable for that because I want someone to look me in the eye and say, you didn't know that we only had X amount of people? We only have 1,800,050 people in the whole state. If you take 6 or 7 of these counties, you might be talking of a couple 100,000 people. You're sending 200 million pills to a couple 100,000 people? To every man, woman, and child and baby? Something's wrong with you. And I want to hear that answer. So yes, it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you're conservative or liberal, this doesn't have a home. This is a killer. And it's taking, that doesn't matter whether you're low end of the socioeconomic ladder or the top end. It's getting everybody.
I want to thank the senator for yielding for a question through the chair and just say to him, I know the problem that you face as a presiding officer and he faces as a senator.
And
twice the intensity of the problem in my state, and I feel it personally. There's no town too small and no suburb too wealthy to avoid the opioid addiction leading to heroin in 80% of the cases, heroin overdoses and deaths. And if you pick up an obituary column in downstate Illinois, my home area, the small town, rural areas, much like West Virginia, and you go to the obituary page and you see the name or photograph of someone between the ages of 18 and 30, I got to tell you, in most instances, it's this, heroin overdose. And it's a sad reality all across my state. I thank the senator.
With Senator and the presiding officer and my colleague from back in West Virginia, we face it every day. There's people, I'm going to read a letter here from another family. I do it once a week because it puts basically a real family with it. But we have such a situation, and we have now people, because of the hard financial time that some states are hitting, why don't you just legalize marijuana? Just legalize it, they're telling me. And they said, because that'll make all your problems, all the taxes you'll receive. I can tell you 99% of the addicts that I talk to, I ask, how'd you get started? How did you go down this pathway of destroying your life? It started with recreational marijuana. Now I've got people coming to me and saying, well, you're a public leader. You're in the political arena. Don't you think we need this revenue? I know we need revenue. I don't think we need it by fostering more addicts. If an addict is telling me, don't do it, but then I got other people saying, well, we need them. I'm not going to do it. I can't in all good conscience. So this is what we're facing right now. And if they think that the revenue off of narcotics, the revenue off of these destroying drugs that we have, if the doctors don't understand it, and here's the thing, the problem, I just said, you've got a top-notch pharmaceutical manufacturing company that does many good things for us and improves our lives, that are producing a product. You've got basically the federal government, DEA and FDA, approving it and allowing it to get on the market. You've got the doctors, who are the most trusted people next to your family, that are telling you take it because it'll help you and be good for you. We've got a full-blown epidemic. We're just fighting Zika now. We have Ebola. We have all these other things that we're concerned about epidemics. And we've got one that's already full-blown and matured. And we're not doing anything. So I'm hoping the common sense will prevail. We found a pay for the lifeboat. Basically, it's 1 penny. And they're saying it's going to be passed on to the consumer. Well, it can't. The CDC basically controls the pricing. So they can't gouge the people. And trust me, it's as profitable as anything they make in the pharmaceutical arena, that 1 penny on a milligram is not going to bankrupt anybody, and it's not going to keep any product off the market that's needed. But you tell me how else we're going to get $1.5 to $2 billion every year to help people in America get off of this horrible epidemic. So I thank the Senator for helping me. I want Madam President to continue reading a letter from one of our constituents. Says, you get them the same as I get them, and we talk about it all the time, and I want to thank you for helping me fight this, because it's something that together we're going to make a difference. The letter goes, I reach out to you in hopes of possibly making a future I've worked really hard for a little brighter. My name is Kayla, and I'm a recovering addict. My sobriety date is February 13th, 2013. I struggle with addiction to pain medication of all sorts. It started out as drinking and smoking when I was 13. That's basically all I ever did until I turned 17 and tried my first pill. It blew me completely out of control from there. While in active addiction, I got in trouble with law enforcement for stealing. I received a charge for grand larceny, and that was when I was only 20. And that was the first and last time I've been in trouble with the law. Nonviolent crime, basically, for stealing. I've changed so much since the day I took the first pill. I completed rehabilitation at Crossroads Recovery home in Gilbert, West Virginia, along with my dear friend Jessica Grubb. And you and I have sponsored Jesse's Law, and we know about this tragedy. And she sadly lost her battle to this horrible disease. It truly saved my life. When I completed treatment, I came home to start drug court in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. I completed that without any sanctions the whole course of the year, and I was in the program, and I did well. I recently moved to Washington State with my husband and children. I want more than anything to take my recovery life a step further by starting college. Ever since I was a little girl, my dream has been to become a veterinarian. That has never changed in my almost 26 years of life. Due to my felony, that dream more than likely can't come true. I would not be able to hold a license unless otherwise approved by the Board of Veterinary Medicine, and it is not likely that they would approve me. I have worked so hard to be where I am at today. My dream is to apply to Ohio State University in August of 2016 for the spring 2017 semester in veterinarian school. I know I can be a vet. I want to prove to addicts everywhere that there is light at the end of the tunnel. The pain can be stopped. You can go from having to have a fix, to get out of bed, to having a doctorate of veterinary medicine degree. I want to show everyone that this small town West Virginia opioid addict made it. And not only that she made it, but that she pushed the limits and reached for the stars. The rumor is true. We do recover. Now let me tell you the rest of the story. Right now, unless we change the laws, unless we change our attitudes about how we treat addiction and look at it as an illness that needs to have treatment, unless we can do that and find the treatment. But here's a person that even that she got sober, she's been sober for over 6 years, turned her life around, wants to be a doctor of veterinary medicine, which she doesn't think she can do now because she ruined her life at a very young age, and she's paying the consequences. But it was a nonviolent crime, a nonviolent crime. So what we have said, and what we're trying to forge a piece of legislation that says, if you have a felony on your record from a drug addiction, and it was not violent, you didn't do it with a violent crime of guns and weapons and harming people. It wasn't a sexual crime where you, a horrible, horrible sexual crime. None of those happened. All you did was steal, which is a crime, and you have a felony on your record. If you go through drug rehabilitation, if you become a mentor for at least another year, so that's a 2-year recovery, and you go before, then you qualify to go before a review panel. That review panel would probably be made up of your sentencing judge, the arresting officers, and the addiction treatment center personnel that could say, you deserve to have one chance in life to clear your record, to expunge your record, and now to be a productive citizen, to be the doctor of veterinary medicine, to be able to be anything you want to. You did screw up and you made a heck of a mistake. But now we're going to give you that second chance because you have fought forward and become clean, you're sober, you're helping other people become clean and sober. And if not, we're going to throw a whole generation of absolutely productive Americans out. And what I'm asking for is a consideration on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, and forget about being Democrats and Republicans. Let's be Americans. Let's reach out and help people who want to be productive Americans and contribute back to society. These are the things we've got to do that are common sense. I'm hoping all of us will come together, and I know we will. Mr. President, I thank you for allowing me to speak on this subject. I do it every week. I'm going to continue to do it until we make changes. It affects your beautiful state of Georgia the same as it affects West Virginia. And we're fighting it, and this is one thing that we all agree on. We must end this opiate addiction, the drug-infested addiction this country has. We are the most drug-infected nation on earth. When you think that 80% of all the opiates in the world that are produced or consumed in a country that has less than 5% of population, the United States of America, something's wrong. We're better than this. We're better than this. Thank you, Mr. President. And I notice the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.